YouTube and I'll come back. Oh, good morning. It's good to see everybody here. I think we got some more people that are going to trickle in, but we'll go and get started. We're going to be in Psalms 46 today. Psalm 46. It will be on the screen, but I can't see the screen, so hopefully I'll remember to change the slides from time to time. The only thing I'm going to project is just Bible verses. So if you like to look at the screen instead of flipping in your Bibles, it'll be there for you. Psalm 46. As we've talked about before when we've looked at Psalms, we've talked about the headings. God, the refuge of his people and conqueror of the nations. And that's interesting. That's obviously a good identifier for what this psalm is about. But the part I want to key in on here at the beginning is to the chief musician, a psalm of the sons of Korah. A psalm of the sons of Korah, a song of Alamoth. We're going to talk about that idea of the sons of Korah. Does that ring a bell, sons of Korah? It's one of those you've studied it before. I guarantee you have. But it's one of those things that's just not the favorite thing for a preacher to preach about. And it has some parallels to a couple other Old Testament stories. But the sons of Korah is an interesting story. And I said, well, what is up with the sons of Korah? And I actually Google searched this and realized the sons of Korah are still a thing today. There are Jewish people that still trace their lineage to the sons of Korah. And there's an important reason for that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the story of the sons of Korah is in the Old Testament, and I think it's an enlightening story before we get into this psalm. And this isn't the only psalm by the sons of Korah. There's 11 of them. It's almost like a pen name, like we don't know which son. It might be the same one over and over again. It might be different sons. We're not sure. But when we go back to the sons of Korah to try to make sense of who they are, the Israelites, back in the days of Moses, were journeying through the wilderness after leaving Egypt. And in Numbers chapter 3, God set aside the Levites. He set aside the Levites out of all the tribes of Israel, and he did not give them the same portion that he gave everyone else. He gave them a role. And he said they're going to be taken care of by the other tribes because they have a special job to do. And we often simplify the Levites as just they're the priest. And that's partly true, but not completely true. Some of the Levites weren't priests. All the priests were Levites, but not all the Levites were priests. We'll talk about that in a second. So anyway, the priests were set aside for full-time service to him, and their main job at the beginning was to take care of the tabernacle, take care of the Ark of the Covenant. And does anybody know the two most famous Levites in the time of Moses? Try Moses and Aaron. They are probably the two most famous, and Miriam, I guess, would have been the third most famous Levite. So we don't think of them as Levites. But when we go, oh yeah, of course, Aaron was the first priest. They would have had, and Moses was the brother of Aaron, so it goes to say that they must have both been from the same tribe. So it never dawned on me either, because we don't think of it that way. Levi himself was the great-grandfather of Moses and Aaron. And Levi had 3 sons, and they were Gershon, Merari, and Kohath. And Kohath was the father of Amram, who, of course, we know as the father of Moses. Also the father of Aaron and Miriam. So anyway, when God set aside the Levites to care for the tabernacle, he also gave the descendants of Aaron, a very specific group of the Levites, a very specific role. The descendants of Aaron were going to be the line of priest. So you get that. Aaron is just one member of the tribe of Levite, but only Aaron's lineage is going to be the priest. And to this day, people who practice Judaism, still those that are very orthodox and trying to be just the letter of the law, they are still trying to prove that I'm of the lineage of Moses and Aaron. That's an important thing to them. Anyway, so all priests were to be Levites according to the law, but as we said before, not all Levites were priests. So the three sons of Levi, Gershon, Merari, and Kohath. Let's talk about each one of these sons real quick, and I promise we'll get to the psalm. But the Gershonites, that's the sons of Gershon, they're responsible for the tabernacle, the tent, the coverings, all the various curtains, the ropes. You're starting to see parallels to the church and how the church works. And some people, they work on the grounds, or they work on maintaining the meeting space, or they work on making sure the everything's ready for the meals, or everything. We all have our little jobs, and it only works to have a church and an assembly if we all do our part, our small part. And God from the very beginning had this plan. The Gershonites handled the tabernacle. The Merarites, sons of Merari, they took care of the frames, the crossbars, the post, the bases, the equipment, the tent pegs, and everything related to their use. I mean, forgive the comparison, but it's almost like a carnival coming to town, right? You got to set the tent up, and you got all the infrastructure of putting it up, and all those people having to do it over and over and over again and put everything up. Obviously, it's a much more sacred thing than a carnival, but it's the same idea that you have all these people assigned to roles to make sure it's done orderly and done correctly and done exactly the way God wants it. And then we come to the third group, the Kohathites, the sons of Kohath, and they were responsible for the most sacred objects in the tabernacle: the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, all the articles used in ministering. So you have the Gershonites and the Merarites. They're allowed to transport their items under their care on carts. I found this really fascinating. But the Kohathites, who had to carry the holy things, the important things, they weren't allowed to cart them. There's a famous story, of course, we know of David skipping this part and getting a poor man killed, who should have known better also, by carrying the Ark of the Covenant the wrong way. But the Kohathites had to carry their items. So imagine trekking across the wilderness, and wilderness again, desert. When you hear wilderness, say desert. And that gives us a much better picture of having to carry something by hand for a long time. There's a perfectly good cart right there, but I can't use it because God said don't use it. He said carry it. And these men have drawn the lot of they always have to carry. They always have to carry. They can't use the carts. What do you think happens after a little while? They get tired, and they start going, why can't I have that job? Why can't I do that? That looks easier. And why can't we just do it that way? Why does God have to have all these specific rules? Why does he have to tell us why? Why do I not get to decide? So they had the burden of transporting all these items from place to place as the camp moved. But they were, get this, the men who had to carry the things were not allowed to actually touch these items. The priest, again, sons of item, so you actually come into contact with the items. They were wrapped in a very special way according to what God would want them to do, and then they would have to carry them through the wrapping. Okay, the cloths or whatever they used. Numbers 4:15 reads, the priests had to prepare the sacred objects by wrapping them in special coverings before they were transported. That's a paraphrase, number 4:15. But many of the Kohathites who were not priests began to hate the work, and they coveted the role of the priest. Priests got a pretty good job. They just wrap it up and say, take it. And then they get to just walk to the next place. It's not an easy life. None of the Israelites lived easy lives, but comparatively, it was an easier role for them, at least when it comes to exerting themselves physically. And we remember how the priests were chosen from the tribe of Levite. They were the descendants of Aaron. So all this is great. What does this have to do with the psalm? Well, let's get to the story of Korah. Korah was the grandson of Kohath. Kohath is the one that has to carry the sacred objects. His descendants have to. But Korah is one of his disgruntled descendants. And the story, you can find it in Numbers 16. I'll put a couple of passages up on the screen in just a second. But Korah was disgruntled. He was kind of mad at the situation. And he began to associate with some other malcontents from the tribe of Reuben. And eventually they had a group of about 250 guys, 250 people that, I don't know if strike is the right thing. Probably rebellion is probably a better word for it. Let's but they rose a group of 250 men and they challenged the right of Moses and Aaron to the priesthood. And that, you find that in Numbers chapter 16 again, as we said. We're going to read verses 28 through 35. So right before this passage we're about to read, Moses summoned all these rebellious men to stand before God and burn incense. And God warned Moses to let the assembly know, stand back, stand away from these men. Never a good sign when Moses says, don't stand near those men over there. Something not good is about to happen. And Moses had let the assembly know to stand away from Korah's men, their households, and all the other rebels. And then a remarkable and terrifying event happens in Numbers 16, 28 through 35. Moses said, "This is how you will know the Lord has sent me to do all these things, and that it was not my idea. If these men die a natural death and suffer the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about something totally new, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them with everything that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the realm of the dead, then you will know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt." As soon as he finished saying all this, the ground under them split apart. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them and their households and all those associated with Korah. Together with their possessions, they went down alive into the realm of the dead with everything they owned. The earth closed over them and they perished and were gone from the community. At their cries, all the Israelites around them fled, shouting, "The earth is going to swallow us too." And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense. Number 16, 28 through 35. So that's the backstory of this term, sons of Korah. And that is not what you were expecting when you heard these guys are calling themselves sons of Korah. These are descendants. These are several generations later by the time we're having these Psalms penned. And if you look in the question we have now, I guess, is how are the sons of Korah? It sounds like a lot of family was taken down with it. In Numbers 26 to 11, we have an explanation for that. And I don't have it on my screen, so I'll read it up here. The sons of Eliab were Nemuel, Dathan, Abiram, and these are the Dathan and Abiram, representatives of the congregation who contended against Moses and Aaron and the company of Korah. They contended against the Lord. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them together with Korah. When that company died, the fire devoured 250 men, and they became a sign. Nevertheless, the children of Korah did not die. So it sounds like the adults around Korah were lost that day. They suffered the same fate. God knew their hearts and knew they were part of what Korah had done. But the children, some of the children at least, were spared. So there was a remnant of the descendants of Korah that survived that day. And we don't know why. Perhaps they were too young to understand their father's behavior. Maybe they were respectful of God. We don't know. But they were spared. And God judged and punished everyone who rebelled against them. But he still had a purpose and plan for even the line of Korah. Does anyone remember another famous descendant of Korah? Does that name ring a bell for any other Bible character? Often called son of Korah? The prophet Samuel. Samuel's often identified as the son of Korah, at least a couple times. And he was a descendant, one of the sons of Korah. He was born 7 generations later after Korah had met his punishment. And Samuel's genealogy is recorded in First Chronicles 6 and in First Samuel chapter 1. You can see that if you like. But the sons of Korah became doorkeepers and custodians for the tabernacle. See that in First Chronicles chapter 9, also mentioned in First Chronicles chapter 2. So they had their role. And I think about this, you know, well, just the other day I was looking at that photograph of the guy who did the assassination, the kid. Looking at it, and I was looking at one of their family photos. And they blurred out the other two brothers' faces. And the parents were smiling, and he was smiling, like a normal family. You looked at that photo and didn't know the context. You would say, "What a nice." And I thought about those two blurred brothers, and their faces blurred out, and I thought, that man's behavior, committing that assassination the way he did. Imagine those two brothers are going to be branded with that for the rest of their lives. That I mean, if Lee Harvey Oswald had a brother, he was branded with it. Anybody who's done something just infamously terrible, you're not just doing it to yourself, you're doing it to those associated with you. Your parents are going to be questioned. Your brothers and sisters are going to be questioned. And it's always, I've read stories about the descendants of Hitler having name is almost wiped out in Germany. Because who would want the name Hitler as your last name? Plenty of people who were related to Hitler had nothing to do with his behavior. Don't want that name on them. That name has been eradicated from anybody with good sense to say, let's go down to the courthouse and change our name. I don't want to be Jonathan Hitler. I don't want to explain that to my high school classes every year when I start teaching. Nobody wants that name. But yet, here's the sons of Korah. It's not a positive relation. It's not a positive relation at all. But they wear that name proudly. Yes. Do you blame them? Right. There was a time in the World War II where you wanted to keep a low profile. Japanese have the same problem. That it's just you get guilty by association, right? And it's a name you run from. You want nothing to do with. What a shame, because we shouldn't be judged by our relatives. I mean, especially with adult relatives that do their own things. Maybe parents sometimes can be judged by their children, absolutely, about what they do. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the sons of Korah kept wearing that name despite all this history. And when you look at their psalm we're going to look at today, seems almost inspired by someone who's remembering the fallen state that they've risen from. Not themselves, but the family. The family has been completely destroyed for their own doing. It was righteous judgment. And yet they wear that name. The psalm we're looking at today sounds like someone who is dwelling on the unmerited redemption of a loving God. Yes, a loving God that did judge an ancestor, rightly judged, but yet a God that spared the children because the children were innocent and allowed the children to become these sons of Korah that are 7 or 8 generations later carrying a very important role, literally writing a portion of the Word of God. Sons of Korah would have had a special insight into the grace God. And I think it's interesting that they wear that name. So next time you see Sephora, just because there's some obscure Bible reference, it's got a really interesting story behind it. And you just don't think of people proudly wearing a name that is really an infamous name, a name that's known as someone who has done something truly awful, rebelled against the one true God, rebelled against the prophet of God, Moses. So we're all familiar with Psalm 42. We're not going to look at that one today, but that's the one that starts, as the deer pants for the water brook, so pants the soul for you, O God. They wrote that one too. They wrote Psalm 42, 44 through 49, 84 through, and 85, 87 and 88. But we're going to look at 46 today. And my intro was probably so long, we may end up being a two-parter, but I just thought it was fascinating to look at who these men were, the Korah. We're going to look at Psalm 46 and its overarching message that God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Put that back on the screen. Psalm 46 is also well known for being the inspiration for Martin Luther's famous song, "Mighty Fortress is Our God." I remember singing that as a young kid. We don't sing it much anymore, but it's still a beautiful song. It uses a slightly different wording. The song, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." I'll be reading from the New King James today, and it typically uses the word refuge, but fortress is another good word for that. And Psalm 46 can be broken into three sections. We're going to read the first three verses here in just a moment. And each break of this psalm is identified with the ending Salah. Y'all have seen that word countlessly if you read the Psalms. And no one knows exactly what that word means. Even Hebrew scholars don't know exactly. They know what it does. They know what it asks you to do, but the actual meaning and etymology, where the word comes from, no one's really sure. But it's basically something like we open up our psalm book, all these little words and phrases all over the place telling you how to sing the song. Well, this was that kind of instruction. And its purpose was a pause for reflection or possibly like a musical interlude in between. They used instruments in the temple period and in the time of the tabernacle, but there was a pause in between the lyrics, the words of this song, where you were supposed to pause and wait a beat. Think about what you just read. Think about those words you've just sung and dwell on it for a moment. I remember reading Furman Bisher columns. Does anybody know that name, Furman Bisher? Yeah, I'm an Atlanta guy. I used to read the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I was a newspaper reader as a young boy. Loved reading the newspaper. I was probably not the coolest kid in town, but I loved reading the newspaper. I used to fight with my dad over the sections of the newspaper I wanted to read. And I liked the sports section. That was always my first grab after making comments, and I worked my way to the other sections that I would read. I'd skip the business section. I said, "Dad, you can have that." But Furman Bisher was a sports columnist of all things. And he was an institution at the Journal-Constitution, Constitution first. They used to be two newspapers, and they merged into one, the Journal-Constitution. Now I read they're not even going to have a print edition anymore, and my heart sank a little bit, thinking, well, I thought, well, when was the last time I subscribed to a paper? I guess I'm part of it. But he would write his columns, sports columns, and he would write every once in a while a very serious column, a column about a serious topic, an important issue. And there was always morality in his sports columns. He would talk about something that happened in sports, an athlete behaving badly, like that. And you could tell he was a religious man. And he would often end his columns with Salah. He would put that word at the end of his, and he didn't wear his religion on his sleeve. He knew that he had a job. People were reading him for the sports ideas and opinions. But he would always say that at the end. And it was a reminder about this. Just dwell on it. And I think it's important that we do that. I think we need more Salah in our lives, more opportunities to sit and think, especially after reading God's word. First section, Psalms 46, 1 through 3. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling. So the psalm begins by describing the confidence we can have in relying on the Lord. God should be a refuge to us, or as Luther uses the word, a mighty fortress to us. God's our strength. God's an ever-present help whenever times of trouble come. And this image reminds us of all the time David in his psalm describes God as a refuge. It's a familiar refrain repeated over and over. God is a place to run to when times of trouble. Are you like me that sometimes when you're in trouble, you kind of feel praying to God because you're like, I think I was praying this hard. Things were going well. And everything's kind of going smoothly. The last time, the time when I forget to pray to God when I'm on vacation and relax, I'm reading a book on a beach somewhere. That's the time when that doesn't occur to me sometimes to read to God. I mean, to pray to God. Now, I sometimes feel guilty when I'm on a plane and the turbulence starts, and I go, you know what, this is a good time to pray. And I feel guilty doing it because I'm like, oh man, am I one of the people that only pray when I'm in the hall, when something wrong is going on? And it reminds me that we should pray all the time. But God says, don't, just because you feel that way and you know you should pray more, don't fail to run to Him in times of trouble. Don't feel guilty about it. Just remind yourself, I got to do better when things aren't going well, when things aren't going perfectly in my life or what I think is perfect. The knowledge of God being a place of refuge that we can run to any time in our lives when we need Him should give us a quiet confidence in even the worst situation. He's not against us. He's always for us. You ever had a moment of doubt when you felt like God had forsaken you, forgotten about you, God was too busy with something else to help you in that situation? But only with the passing of time, after it's over, after you've come through the other side, you look back and go, He was with me all along. Yes, I suffered. Yes, it lasted longer than I would have wished it for. But ultimately, even through that suffering, it took me to a place where I'm better off at the end of it. And I know there's tragedy in our lives, and no one would ever say we're better off because we've lost a loved one or lost a marriage, lost whatever circumstance. But ultimately, as individuals, we're not promised those things will never happen to us. Even in those awful things, God is going to help us understand things about life, the transient nature of life. He's going to help us understand those things do not destroy us. They are unfortunately part of life, and that ultimately we learn from those things. We become stronger human beings. We become more empathizing human beings for others going through similar circumstances. How many great stories have you heard of someone who lost someone to cancer or disease and turned that into, that's my mission. That's my mission in life, to help others. I mean, that's what God can do for us. He can allow us to turn the ultimate tragedies and hardships into things that we can do His goodwill on this. God's doing many things for us in this life. He's ever present help for us. And there's a Hebrew idiom I read in a commentary that says, God is a help that can be found when you need it. He's always there. He's always findable. And there's moments where we stop looking for it, but it's there to find anytime. And God does not say, well, you're only a fair weather, or you're only here when you need. He doesn't do that. He's willing to forgive and forgive and forgive and accept us back every time. Prodigal son comes to mind when I think of that. So God's a reliable, dependable God. And one of the disappointments in our human friends, those we come into, that we deal with on a daily basis, not always dependable. And a lot of us try to get through life just depending on our friends, our family, our acquaintances. They're going to let you down. Eventually, they're going to let you down. They're not going to want to. They're going to try not to. If you're good friends, you're good family members, but ultimately, they are not going to be able to give you what God gives you. God says He will always be there in our time of trouble. He will not die. He will not be on vacation. He will not be unavailable at any time. He will always be there for us. And this is the reason why the psalmist says there in verse 6 that we will not fear. Doesn't matter what happens, there's no need for fear because God is going to be our refuge, our ever present help. And notice how strong of a confidence we're supposed to have in God. It says there, the earth may shake and give way, but we have no reason to fear. Those verses seem so much more relevant. We're living in a time where, at least all the scientists I read, say that we're having more natural disasters than any generation that recorded history. We have more hurricanes, more tornadoes, more uh, signs of things that your earth is not going to last forever. It is not a permanent place that we cannot ever feel we're 100% physically safe at all times. Not to mention the things we do to each other, the crime, the murders, and the things that we see in our media. We just cannot have confidence in our earth to protect us. But he says you can have absolute confidence in God. He says mountains can fall into the ocean, but we will not fear. The waters can roar and foam. We have no reason to fear. What are these images describing? It's not a rhetorical question. What are we describing here? Earth that is a destructive, hard place. I mean, go watch a nature documentary sometime. You want to just see the nice, cute animals, but every time I watch one, it turns into a battle, a battle to survive. One animal trying to eat another animal. I mean, the earth does not get it. It is a natural thing that God has created for us, and there are good aspects of it. We love the beauty of it and the amazingness of it, but it is not designed to keep us physically safe. There are tragedies that befall us all the time. And we're still terrified by all the things we see on the earth. And we're even better at predicting them than generations ago. People at the time when this psalm was written, what an earthquake must have felt like, or what a tornado or a hurricane, if they live near a coast, must have felt like. It must have felt like God's judgment. It must have felt like some supernatural thing that they had no scientific explanation for what it was and why it occurred. Imagine those people at the bottom of Mount Vesuvius when that thing erupted, and then all of a sudden, lava completely destroyed an entire house, the entire city. And these things could not have been even understood. And this is what the psalmist is writing about, real terrifying disasters. And he's saying, even with these things, you should not fear. Again, I think we're protected by at least the illusion that we can predict these things and know they're coming, and we can get away from them. We can avoid them, even though we probably can't. We're not to be shaken even when the world seems to be falling apart. And I mean, this is symbolism the psalmist is bringing to mind. It is symbolism. It's also wonderful. But the symbolism is the psalmist is probably not really talking about natural disasters here. When we say our world is falling apart, we know what that is. That's issues in our family, issues in our workplace, issues with our friends, issues in our marriages, issues that really, really shake us to the core, cause us to lose faith. It's when our lives feel like a natural disaster. And that's when we're supposed to remember God is for us. And he can be found time of trouble. Our world may figuratively or even literally collapse around us, but we can have absolute confidence because of God. We spoke of this last Sunday. When our world's falling apart, we have two choices. The world has two choices. We can go two ways. One way is to think God has left us, He has forsaken us, and we can say, shake an angry fist at God, or say there is no God. Prove it. That's one way we can go. But the second way is expressed here in Psalm 46. God is here all the time, right now, and we simply need to run to His refuge. Psalm 46, 4 through 7. There's a river whose streams shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her. Just at the break of dawn, the nations raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, the earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Verse 4, we're called to run to the city of God. You think of fight or flight. Every time we have panic or shock, there's two things you can do. You can shut down. I guess there's three things. You can run away, or you can choose to fight. The first step to having this lack of fear in the face of disaster is that we have to know that we couldn't fight it alone. We can't fight these forces in our life. They're too big, too strong, too powerful. They are going to crush us if we go it alone. But if we put our full trust in God, we can fight them. We can fight these sorrows and these miseries, these things that we face. So in this psalm, He's described as this powerful fortress, this city, this refuge. And you think about back in the days of the Old Testament when enemies would attack a city, not everybody lived in the walls. I've been to a lot of European walled cities, and they're pretty small places. And there's no farmland usually inside. So, that's why sieges work, because if you could camp an army all the way around a walled city and just be prepared to be there for a year, you'll starve the people out of that city eventually. They have no way they don't have any land, they don't have any supplies, they cannot take care of themselves over long periods. You cut off their water supply, you can do all kinds of things. And in these walled cities, most of the people did not live inside the walls of the city. The king did. The important people did. They could afford to live there. They had mansions and fortresses and nice places to stay and had people to bring them everything they needed. They lived in walled cities. But most of the people lived outside the walls of the city. But they knew that if times get bad, if an attacking army comes, they can find safety. How would they do that? Run into that city, go inside those walls, and at least momentarily, you'll be protected. We can't stand outside the fortress of God and expect to be protected by God. That's a metaphor. I'll let you think about what that would mean. Standing outside the fortress of God. It means God's not important to you. He's only important to you when you're in trouble. He's only important when there seems to be no solution. When I hear people today say they need God, they don't need His church, that's what I think about. God gave us a refuge, and He chooses to be with us through an assembly. It was important to the first century church. They assembled. They had meals together. They conversed together. They knew each other's needs. And if you wanted me to try to boil down all the church's problems today, it's that we have lost the community. We're not the church in every way that the first century was the church. Transportation has done that for us. Ironically, we have more transportation, and it's harder for us to be in the same room at the same time. Think about that. We have jobs that take away. We have family responsibilities. And I'm not harping. I'm just as guilty of this. But we have allowed our fast-paced modern life Church should be over by now. It's time to go. I need to go. I need to go. And we don't want to be with each other as much as we should. And we need to figure out how to solve that, how to be in each other's homes, to associate one another, to visit with each other, to know. And I know I hate saying things like this. I feel like hypocrite. Because I don't do this as well as I should. None of us do. I can't say none of us do. Some of us probably do. I just don't know it. But when I hear people today say they don't need the church, I think about this passage. Responsibility is first placed on us to go to the refuge. Somebody will say, well, that God doesn't want us to do anything. God's going to save us through his grace. There's nothing we have to do. Listen, me running into God's refuge is not me saving myself. I did not build those walls. I did not create that refuge. I didn't save myself. I did what any logical thing would do. I run to the person, the God, who can protect me and who can save me. When I ever hear somebody say that nothing we have to do as Christians, you don't have to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. You don't have to be baptized in his body. You don't have to be a part of his body. Of course, there's things we have to do. It does not take even one shred of God's grace away from him. There would be no reason to run to God if he didn't give us his grace. If he did not give us an opportunity to be redeemed. But responsibility is first placed on us to run to God's safety. It's something that we must do. Just because we run to the refuge doesn't mean we have anything to do with the fact that we are saved. We've done the bare minimum by running into his walls, his fortress, allowing him to save us. One more minute. I know I'm not going to finish this. I'm going to ask Jim to let me have this class for one more week, and I apologize if I'm taking him away, but I'm allowing him to have that young adult class back a little more. We have a couple of college students that are with us. I'm trying to make sure that to meet. I know Jim, that's where his heart wants to be. He wants to be with that small group. And I respect that. So, and that's been our numbers a little bit today because most of our members are back there. That's wonderful. But if you'll forgive me for not getting through this psalm in one lesson, we will continue this next week, and we will pick up. We're going to verse 4 through 7 and finish it, and I'll have a backup psalm to fly through that. You probably already know. I probably won't. So, I appreciate you listening to me, and I apologize for not asking a lot of questions. This was more of a sermon than the teaching a traditional class. But hopefully, you got something out of it, and I appreciate your attention.